Hello all. I'm glad to be invited as a part of this lecture series of the Shankara alumni. My journey in Shankara happened between 2010 and 2012, and it has taught me a lot under the able guidance of Dr. Kaushik Murli, Dr. Saumya, Dr. Vidya, and also Dr. Meena, Dr. Anand, Dr. Minij, and of course Dr. Umesh. I have learned a lot at Shankara, as you all know, and that has made me what I am today. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Ophthalmology in Ramaya Medical College and Hospitals. Today, I'll be talking about the cosmetic conundrum that is sensory exotropia. So my journey after Shankara started in 2012. And I've been taking care of the pediatric ophthalmology and strabismus clinic in Ramaya Medical College and Hospitals. So we'll be talking about the management of sensory exotropia today. So an introduction to sensory exotropia. Basically, why does it occur, right? It occurs because of a loss of sensory fusion, and this loss can happen either because of a refractive or an organic cause. And this refractive or organic cause should lead to a profound amblyopia, leading to a loss of sensory fusion and hence squint. Now, this strabismus can either be convergent or divergent, and it's usually seen that it's divergent after the age of 5. But below the age of 2, it's usually convergent. But there are various studies that have come up with different such magic numbers, so to say, and sometimes even the cause of the loss of sensory fusion can decide whether it is a convergent or a divergent squint. What's important here is that these exotropias can have a psychosocial impact, as is the case with any squint for that matter. But it becomes even more so because what we tend to think is that, a surgery for a sensory exo is primarily cosmetic, but not necessarily so. It can have a reconstructive aspect as well. There have been case reports where there is a surprise improvement in the stereopsis post correction of your exotropia. So it is important to give due consideration to a patient with a sensory exotropia and see what best can be done for such patients. So how do these squints work, right? So usually the dictum is sort of like this. So if there is a congenital cataract, if basically there is any congenital cause, especially when it is bilateral, it leads to an esotropia for the most part. If it is unilateral, if you have a unilateral cataract, it could be either ESO or an EXO. Well, acquired cataracts usually end up in an exotropia. What has been found by Haver-Tape et al. Is that there is no correlation between the direction of heterotropia and the visual acuity or type of refractive error. So it's primarily the age, and sometimes you can have surprises in terms of ESO and EXO, notwithstanding the age. So congenital visual loss, as we can see here, 67% develop sensory ESO, while 33% develop sensory EXO. And when it comes to acquired, a whopping 90% develop sensory exotropia, as against 10% who develop sensory esotropia. So what are the surgical principles that we take into account when we treat a patient with a sensory exo? So it's important to treat the maximal angle and give realistic expectations. So we know that there is loss of sensory fusion, and fusion is an important aspect of strabismus in terms of its causation as well as its correction. So the patient and his or her parents should know what to expect post surgery, and you should warn them of a possibility of further surgery as well, because considering that there is a good chance of failure over a period of time, they may require further surgery. So the usual surgery that is performed is a medial rectus resection or plication and lateral rectus resection. So with or without adjustable sutures is one's decision to make. And one usually avoids the non-amblyopic eye because you don't want to touch the better eye, right? For the most part, if we can take care of the strabismus with the eye that requires the surgery, we stick to that. But what are the caveats? So the problem areas are these. So you can have a postoperative deviation, and it's been found that there is a exotropic drift of approximately 8 prism diopters per year. So Chalifu et al. And Park et al. Studied that success rates were somewhere between 71.6 to 75%, while Hopker et al. Suggested that there is a 92% success rate in children with even a 1 muzzle recession. So again, the things that we need to keep in mind are postoperative deviation and the exotropic drift. So what leads to a successful outcome? So the amount of preoperative deviation. So it's seen that a larger preoperative deviation tends to have a less successful outcome than a small preoperative deviation. The initial postoperative deviation. So as we will discuss further, an overcorrection is always considered better than perfect correction because of the exotropic drift, like we discussed. So it's important to hope for a slight overcorrection rather than perfect orthophoria at the end of surgery or the first day post-op. And the amount of lateral rectus recession also has a bearing on the successful outcome. A post-op abduction deficit could also have a bearing in that, an immediate or a fast recovery of abduction could mean that there is an increased chance of an exotropic drift. What really did not affect or does not affect outcome are age and the duration of strabismus. So that's a plus. So, you could consider strabismus surgery for a sensory exotropia notwithstanding the age. But what are some points to ponder? So, do you want to use adjustable or do you want to use non-adjustable sutures? So, there are various studies that say that adjustable work well. There are various studies that say non-adjustable work well. And there are studies that also say that, like the study by Park et al. Says that whether adjustable or not, the outcomes are similar. Another thing I would like to add from personal experience is that doing such surgeries under topical anesthesia might make a lot of sense because you have, real-time assessment of whether your surgery is working or not. So like we mentioned, overcorrection is associated with better long-term outcomes. That's all good when you say that, but what is the amount of overcorrection that you're looking at? So in terms of sensory exotropia, we are looking at around about 10 to 15 PD of esotropia post-surgery in order to take care of the exotropic drift. So does visual acuity have a bearing on the surgical outcome? Of course it would, because considering the principles of strabismus itself, so because there is a loss of sensory fusion, you have a sensory exotropia happening. So if there is a chance of your fusion happening post-operatively with some amount of vision or a better visual acuity in the affected eye, then the chance of long-term success is also better, which is also proven by studies such as Turan et al., which say that better visual acuity seems to be a potential predictor for higher long-term success after strabismus surgery in patients with sensory strabismus. So in large squints, so we did say that in a sensory exotropia, you'd rather operate on the eye that is affected, the amblyopic eye. You wouldn't want to touch the non-amblyopic eye. But if you have a squint of approximately 75 to 80 PD, it is very difficult to correct it with just a medial rectus resection and a lateral rectus resection. So you might need to consider doing, a 3-muzzle surgery. So you might need to operate on the non-amblyopic eye. But having said that, it's, as is the case with most other squints as well, it's difficult to, convince the parents that, okay, since the angle of deviation is large, I'm going to touch the non-amblyopic eye. So that's something we need to take into consideration because parents may not be very comfortable about you operating on the normal eye. So the other options available are, you could do a supramaximal recession of the lateral rectus up to approximately 12 to 13 mm. Okay, that could cause a better correction of your large angle sensory exotropias. Or You could also use a botulinum A toxin as an adjunct to monocular recession resection, as has been emphasized by Tuchu et al., who say that that has a better outcome, both immediate and long term, especially for patients with large sensory exotropias. So what about single muscle surgeries? So in children, especially in children, and in squints where, where the angle of deviation is approximately 25 to 30 PD, you could get away with doing just a lateral rectus recession, right? So the advantages are that, there is a high success rate, and the overcorrection, though we aim to have an overcorrection immediate post-op, you don't want it over a long period of time. So fewer overcorrections. And should you require, a reoperation, there is a muscle that has been untouched. So this is the advantage of a single muscle surgery. And the success rates in this are pretty good, approximately 90%. So in my experience, so we had this patient who was a 16-year-old adolescent, just about getting into his pre-university college. And, like we mentioned, a squint can cause lack of confidence, reduced confidence in making interpersonal relationships. So he came to us wanting his squint to be corrected. He had a monocular high myopia, and we did give him a realistic view of what to expect, right? So you can see that there is a slight overcorrection that we aimed at, and he is doing well till date. This is another patient, again, a 15-year-old female who whose parents were pretty, worried about her squint and her appearance. And so she had a macular scar in the left eye, which is why she had a sensory exo. And we did medial rectus resection and a lateral rectus recession. And, the results are here for you to see. So what next? So these are the patients lined up further for surgery. This is one girl who's just about finished school, and she has a high myopia of approximately -20 with an exotropia of 50 PD. And she has come to us for correction, as well as this patient who has a left eye sensory exo. He has had a history of, keratoplasty when he was around 10 years of age, and post that he has developed not just a cornealoplasty, a failed graft, as well as a sensory exo. So these are things that are lined up. These are things that we need to treat. Like I mentioned, it's important to take cognizance of the fact that such sensory exos have to be given due importance, because they have a significant psychosocial impact on adolescents as well as children nowadays, because we're looking at appearances and being able to talk to one another, and how the perception of others about us. So it's important to take these sensory exos into consideration and give our best. And the take home is that aim for a slight overcorrection, and keep them on follow up. Ensure that you give them realistic expectations, and also tell them the possibility of resurgeries. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you.